All that, I used to be cruel to my woman and beat her, that's me, because I used to be cruel to my woman and physically. Any woman, you know, I was a hitter. I couldn't express myself, and I fought men, I hit women, I was violent. That's why I'm always on about peace. You see, it's the most violent people that go for love and peace. And I sincerely believe in love and peace. But I am absolutely a violent man who has learned not to be violent and regrets his violence.
What happened then? I mean, John was very, very jealous and very possessive. And I think he actually said that later on in his life in an interview, but not to me. But I mean, I was aware of his jealousy, and I was aware not of his violence, because I hadn't seen his violence at that point. But I mean, he didn't beat me up. I mean, he just smacked me across the face, and I hit my head against the pipe in college. And at that point I thought, well, I've never experienced this in my life, and I don't want to see it again. And I didn't.
But you forgave him?
Well, it took 3 months. I left him at that point and I said, on your bike. To a certain extent, I'm not, you know, why should I put up with this? There'd been an awful lot of nurturing and looking after his delicate ego at that time, and his pain. And I thought, well, you know, I can only go so far and no further. So it took 3 months before he actually phoned me and we got back together again, because I loved him, you know, it's as simple as that.
Did he ever have any remorse openly towards you? Did he ever say he was sorry? Did you ever discuss it again?
Oh yes, I mean, he was desperately sorry. He didn't. It was an instant. It was something that he couldn't help himself, and he didn't do it again. And I wouldn't have been with him if he had. In fact, that was the first and last time that he ever lifted a finger or a hand to me. So he learnt his lesson. But he did, on the odd occasion, have a few altercations with other people in his life when he couldn't help it, and it was to do with booze at the time. He could not take his drink. John.
The first national paper press we got was the back page of the Mirror with me beating up Bob Wooler at Paul's 21st. That was the first Lennon hits out story, you know, and that was the first national stuff we got, and that was terrible, you know. And I was so bad the next day. They had a BBC appointment, and they all went down the train. I wouldn't come. And Brian came into my house in Mendips, you know, and was pleading with me to go down there. And I was so afraid, you know, what the outcome of nearly killing him, because I nearly killed him, you know. Because I think he'd said something about, you know, he insinuated me and Brian had an affair in Spain, you know. So I remember it vaguely. I was out in my mind to drink all, you know, when you get down to the point where you drink all the empty glasses, that drunk. And he was saying, well, come on, John, tell me something like that. He was saying, tell me about you and Brian. We all know like that. And obviously I must have been frightened of the fag in me to get so angry at that. You know, when you're 21, you want to be a man and all that. And it was the first time I thought, I can kill this guy, you know. I just saw it like from on a screen, that if I hit him once more, that's going to be it, you know. And that's when I gave up violence, because all my life had been like that. And that's when I really got a shock, you know.
If it had said television is more popular than Jesus, I might have got away with it. You know, but as I just happened to be talking to a friend, I used the word Beatles as a remote thing, not as what I think, as Beatles as though those other Beatles like other people see us. And I just said they are having more influence on kids and things than anything else, including Jesus. But I said it in that way, which is the wrong way.
Well, some teenagers have said, have repeated your statements that the Beatles, I like the Beatles more than Jesus Christ. What do you think about that?
Well, originally I was pointing out that fact in reference to England, that we meant more to kids than Jesus did, or religion at that time. I wasn't knocking it or putting it down. I was just saying it as a fact, and it is true, especially more for England than here. You know, I'm not saying that we're better or greater or comparing us with Jesus Christ as a person or God as a thing or whatever it is. You know, I just said what I said and it was wrong or was taken wrong, and now it's all this.
Did they come up and start physically threatening you?
Yeah,
No, go on, you say
we
that.
got to the airport and our road managers had a lot of trouble trying to get the equipment in because the escalators had been turned off and things. So we got there and we got put into the transit lounge, And then we got pushed around from one corner of the lounge to another, you know.
You treat like ordinary passenger, passenger, you were saying. If it's an ordinary passenger, he doesn't get kicked, does he?
And so they started knocking over our road managers and things, and everyone was falling all over the place.
That started worrying you when the road manager got knocked over.
Yeah, and I swear there was 30 of them.
What do you say there were?
Well, I saw 5 in sort of outfits, you know, that were sort of doing it, the actual kicking and booing and shouting.
Did you get kicked?
No, I was very delicate and moved every time they touched me. But I was petrified. I could have been kicked and not known it. You know, I just know I was
getting booed. You haven't been if you're going to have these battles. You
yes,
know?
well,
we just never go to any nut houses again.
Would you go to Manila again, George?
No, I didn't even want to go that time.
Me too.
No, because we'd heard that it was a terrible place anyway, and when we got there it was proved.
Very sort of cowardly anyway of them, because they were obviously, you know, trying to make it rough for us and knew we couldn't do anything back because all the papers had sort of turned against us. So, you know, if they'd have started something, it would have been all the Filipinos there against us, probably.
And we couldn't even say anything on the way to the plane. Like the press was saying, some of them that hadn't quite seen it with radios, you know, they'd been waiting at the other end. Say, well, what was it like? There's a bit of booing going on with it, but never, you know, will he be back? And I was dying to say, come on. But I
What you need is a large...
too frightened.
What you need is
like so.
John, where would you be today without me?
Brian just died, and that left us really in the air. We didn't know anything about the business side, not one iota about it. Well, we were in rather a predicament, having been left with contracts signed at me being the next eldest, Ringo the oldest, but me being 23 when we signed all those things, and the other two being 21 and 22. And what we got into then is still hanging us up now. That's why the ball game has been so difficult, because everything we signed in those days was signed with, we didn't know what we were signing, right? So that's 10 years ago, and now we're still trying to unravel what happened 10 years ago.
There's a huge void. We didn't know anything about, you know, our personal business and finances, and, you know, he was taking care of everything. And I suppose it was chaos after that.
We're suddenly like chickens without heads. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Paul made an attempt to carry on as if Brian hadn't died, you know. I think Paul had an impression that we should be thankful for what he did, for keeping the Beatles going.
At some point, I know John got a bit annoyed, sort of saying, you know, Paul's sort of trying to be the leader of the group and stuff. It's possible that I was there more than anyone. You know, that I mean, when we did Magical Mystery Tour, for instance, I ended up kind of directing it, even though we said, well, the Beatles had directed it at the end. Just because I was there most of the time, and all the late night chats with the cameramen about what we're going to do tomorrow would tend to be me.
How did you feel when the Beatles split up? Was it a liberation or was it difficult?
No, it was very difficult. It wasn't a liberation at all. Personally, it was a liberation because I'd been living with three guys, you know, and that's nice in one way. But you know, if you're a guy growing up, you don't want to live with three guys. So personally, when I got married and I was able to sort of discover more about myself as an individual, and in a marriage relationship, obviously, you know, there's a lot of learning and a lot of giving and taking to be done. So that was a very fresh period for me. But it was a difficult time because it wasn't a clean break. The business difficulties that were created are still going on, would you believe? 20 years later. It's a shame, really. But these things, when, you know, unless you set it up perfectly business-wise, they have a way of doing that. And then you get some lawyers in on the case and you're really screwed. But, so it was quite sad, really, to break up with the Beatles, because they were friends, you know, and to see it just fall apart was sad.
They're always trying to pinpoint what happened, why the Beatles split up, right? Well, the Beatles were splitting up themselves, you know, disintegrating is the word for it. And I think the Klein Eastman situation really pushed it over the hill.
You're not saying that you wouldn't have split, but
no,
for Klein Eastman?
It's like we were going to get a divorce anyway. It was in, you know, like the marriage wasn't going too well. Nothing, you know, you can put your finger on, but the marriage was over. The presumption is, A, that the Beatles would get together again, or even thinking about it. B, that if they got together, John and Yoko split, Paul and Linda split, or now that we've left Klein, that the rumour now is that Paul's leaving Eastman. It just has, it's non sequitur. It doesn't have anything to do with that decision. And
at the time, when we split, we'd had too much input from, everything, all that being close together, touring the world, mania, everything like that. It was, we needed a rest from each other, and we needed space to grow. I think it's important because we're growing all the time, and when you like that situation, it's just like a family. You're so close together, and then you grow older and you want to move and you want to go into your own house and have your own friends. And that was necessary. I don't have any regrets, the Beatles splitting up. I think they did a fantastic thing in that short time. But everybody wants them to go together again, and it's impossible. I think it's better left as it is.